What's up, Penn State fans? It's BWI Live, Wednesday, October 1st. Welcome to the month of October. The month of September went okay for Penn State. Well, as expected through the first three non-conference games. Not as expected or hoped for during the Oregon game. I'm Greg Pickle. That's Thomas Frank Carr. T. Frank from BWI, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Nittany Lions getting set to face UCLA, who is undergoing some more change as it gets ready to search for its first win as a 25.5-point underdog at BetMGM. T. Frank, we heard from James Franklin on Monday. You and the guys kicked it around at length on Tuesday. We are now up to the Wednesday portion of UCLA week. Penn State will be leaving roughly like about 30 hours from now to head out west after a Thursday morning practice. So it's a condensed week, but here we are getting ready for Penn State to kick off the October portion of its schedule and finally head on the road, which may or may not come at a very good time for this program.
Yeah, I think it's good to get on the road, just in the sense of getting out of the bubble. I think getting away might be good for this team. And, you know, with the pressure and the intensity of the emotion around this team, it's not going away because the internet goes everywhere with you in your pocket, but not having it in your daily life for a couple of hours, seeing the West Coast, the sun, you know, that might do some good for some people, you know, just kind of a mental reset.
I don't think it's a bad thing, and I'm not going to go too overboard with it because it is cliche, but I do think there's times, especially in college football, where the NFL, you live wherever you live. You're not on a campus. You're not necessarily subjected to interacting with fans and things like that. On a college campus, you are. So to get to go the whole way across the country for a few days and reset and try and focus on just playing better football certainly can't help the cause for the Nittany Lions, and the opponent is helping the cause. So last week, UCLA had a first week defensive coordinator in Kevin Coyle, who, as James Franklin noted on Monday, I'm not sure if you guys covered this yesterday, but if not, you can watch this whole press conference here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Kevin Coyle was at Syracuse 2 weeks ago when Deshaun Foster got fired. Tim Skipper, the interim head coach, and the previous defensive coordinator, whose name I am not going to try and pronounce, parted ways. So Kevin Coyle was brought across the country to be the play caller for UCLA, called plays against Northwestern. Tim Skipper said on Monday that he would continue to do that moving forward. Fast forward to Tuesday night, about 9 o'clock Eastern time, 6 o'clock Pacific time. News breaks from the Los Angeles Times that Tino Sunseri is out as the offensive coordinator at UCLA, and that means Jerry Neuheisel is in. Why is that interesting? Obviously, he's Rick Neuheisel's son. I'm sure some of you listen to his show on SiriusXM. Curious, of course, to hear later today, when time permits, what he had to say, if anything, about this. But T. Frank, the stunning thing to me is not that UCLA picked Jerry Neuheisel to do this, because he has been moving up the coaching ranks. And I think that at some point, they'll probably do something similar to what they did with Kevin Coyle, bring in somebody who's done this before to do it the rest of the year. But when you make a change on Tuesday of game week and your coaching staff has 0 former play callers on it, someone has to be the one to do it for the first time against a Penn State defense that is undoubtedly very hungry to get after an opposing quarterback and offense this week.
Yeah, and how long has Jim Knowles been doing this? I mean, that
quite
is
a long time. Yeah.
the disparity there in experience of in-game play calling, as we know, which is a bit of an art into the science. And Jerry Neuheisel might be very good at it, but you're right. Like, I just wonder. I try not to get too into other people's business of what fight led to that, because that feels like something that happened very abruptly. You don't fire a coordinator on Tuesday, because just in the way the process goes, you're forming your game plan on Sunday, right? So you're putting, and there's prep that goes into it before. So it's not like you're just doing everything on Sunday. You've been preparing for these teams all off season. You have kind of a profile of what you think you're going to do in that game based on what you do, and then what you think they do, their personnel, etc. And then as you get more film, you can adapt and tweak and say, that week of the game, you go, okay, here's what we've learned since we put this all together, and here's our advanced scouting. And then by Tuesday, you're practicing. You're putting all that into implementation. And to fire your coach on Tuesday is like, wow.
Yeah, and keep in mind, UCLA practices in the morning Pacific time, so that they already went through this. Now, whether it's Whether Tino Sinceri or Jerry Neuheisel was leading the offense, we don't know at this point. UCLA coach Tim Skipper is going to talk at roughly 2 p.m. Eastern time today. I'm sure there won't be a ton of new details that come out of that, but there will be some. So we'll have that covered for you over at bluewhiteillustrated.com. But yeah, I think to me, T. Frank, the question I have for you is, and we're going to cover the UCLA defense and the Penn State offense too, quite a bit throughout the rest of this show. So I think it's okay to maybe talk about this here. But from your point of view, UCLA is not a good football team, in my opinion. And the fact that they have coordinators in the situations they are only adds to that trouble that they've had so far throughout an 0-4 start. From a perspective of Jim Knowles having to plan for a coordinator who he has no clue what he's going to do, but still has the tape, obviously, from the first 4 UCLA games. Like, I think some fans are going to wonder, does it matter at all? Does it make any impact? Does it give UCLA any kind of an edge? And I just want you to tell people that one way or the other.
I don't think so, because like I said, you've already implemented the plan. So like if you're going to then on Wednesday implement an entirely new plan, you've just wasted 2.5 days. And that is not something you don't have the time afforded to you to do that, because you only get so many hours of practice a week. These are college kids. Like, you're not going to be like, all right, guys, here's what's going to happen. We're just going to scrap the whole thing, and then Wednesday we're going to meet in the morning, and we're not going to leave until we have it all down. Like, that doesn't happen. You can't do that. So the plan is the plan this week is the plan, and they can tweak and adapt some things, but it's really going to be about like the sequencing of the play calling, the unpredictability of what they've been working on, right? Because I'm sure that they have been trying to adapt week to week what they're doing. But I'll just tell you, like, having watched this offense, there's a lot I didn't understand about the route concepts and the kind of the way things were trying to work together that really did not have a cohesive theme. I remember watching them, I don't know if it was against Utah or early in the year. I don't know what this offense is trying to do.
Right.
So normally, like, routes combine together to put a defense in a situation where somebody gets open because a player has to make a choice, right? And sometimes it's a choice they're not supposed to make or they shouldn't make, but you're forcing them to do so because of the situation you're putting them in. I saw, and this is also me, not being a savant in the passing game in an area, if I admit, like, I'm not strong with passing concepts. But I've watched enough football to know, like, I didn't see anything I recognized. It was just routes. And so, like, yeah, I'm not surprised, actually, by this. But at the same time, like, to do it when you do it and to have this kind of chaos does not instill confidence in an offense that really needs some clear direction. And I think they've gone in a more concise direction recently, but it's still... I mean, it's not great. Just none of this is great.
Yeah, and you just have to question how Jerry Neuheisel and whatever is left of that offensive staff at UCLA can make sense of it quickly enough to deal with a Penn State defense that certainly has been good for most of this year and held up its end of the bargain for the most part against Oregon. Anyway, we'll get into more of that later. Speaking of offenses, T. Frank, let's talk about the one that everyone tuning into the show wants to talk about. It is, of course, the Penn State offense. So the Nittany Lions come out of this 30-24 double overtime loss against Oregon with tons of questions. James Franklin's press conference was heavy on questions about the offense, as you would expect, both after the game and on Monday during his first news conference of UCLA week. You guys rehashed all of that in great detail, you on the post-game show, and then obviously you, Nate, and Sean yesterday on Tuesday's edition of BWI Live. But, I mean, so let's get into this conversation here. So Penn State's offense certainly in a lot of key statistical categories was not as good as expected during the non-conference schedule, and then did what it did against Oregon, where for the first 49 minutes, it couldn't do much of anything. 48, I guess it was, somewhere between 48 and 49. I'm not a math guy. And then for the final, 10, 11 of regulation, plus the first series of overtime, it looked like an offense that was capable of doing things. So let's just start this conversation, T. Frank, with an overall October 1st assessment. And I'm going to put you on the spot and maybe say, give me a grade of where you think Penn State's offense exits September before we get into the conversation about how to fix it. I think it's safe to say we're not going to give them an A. So I went with, in my bye week in my bye week report card, I gave Penn State a C+ for the non-conference schedule.
Yeah.
If I was doing another one that included the Oregon game today, I'd probably keep it right around that, maybe lower it a slight amount based on what they did for the final 11 minutes. Yeah. But it's just, it's kind of where things are at this point.
So a lot of times when somebody asks me a question like that, an immediate number or thing does jump into my head, and it's the thing I don't want to say. C minus is like the ceiling of where I would say the offense has been so far this year. And I actually was encouraged with where it started out against Nevada. And I understand Nevada, and give me a break, T. Frank, but it's about the process. It's about what you're trying to accomplish, what you want to be, and what you're doing. That I thought instilled some confidence in me, at least, into what the identity of this offense was going to be. And I going and looking at the information today, something Nate said yesterday about throwing on first down. I went and I looked at some of the numbers. That's going to be kind of where I want to get to in a lot of this is fixing the passing game. Yeah. Because I feel like the run game is what it is in certain aspects. And we can talk about that in a minute. But a lot of the focus, I think, is reconfiguring the passing game, because certain things there just aren't working. And the other thing is the game plan against the first three opponents and then against Oregon, we do have to separate those, because you don't just run an offense. You run an offense against what you are expecting or what you get in a game. And what they got against Oregon was very different than the first 3 weeks. So routes, situations, play calling, all those things should adapt to the situation. And so there is a very different theme for Oregon as opposed to the first 3 games. And yet the overarching conclusion is the passing game is inconsistent and has a hard time sustaining itself with completions. So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at today, is like, where do you get completions in this offense? How do you get a rhythm, as James Franklin has talked about? He suggested some of those things. In the press conference, we're going to be playing off of that and explaining in the context of what he's saying, how that might apply. But to your grade question, as much as I wanted to be optimistic about some of these things coming out of the non-conference season, it's C minus at best.
All right. Well, if you want to go watch some of the fixes we are going to talk about on today's show that we're hoping to see when Penn State, of course, you're hoping to see when Penn State is on the field at UCLA this Saturday. You can go to the game and you can get the best price available with Game Time, gametime.co. If you want to see Penn State at UCLA this weekend, if you want to go to a postseason baseball game this week, next week, your favorite NFL team, so on and so forth, right now at gametime.co, tickets are going for, it looks like about $40 is the cheapest way to get in, including fees at the Rose Bowl, and that would have you seated on the corner of an end zone. Based on what I've seen so far from the crowds at the UCLA games at the Rose Bowl so far, I kind of feel like no matter where you sit or where you buy a ticket, you're going to sit somewhere probably a little bit better. But check out gametime.co for the best prices on Penn State UCLA. You won't be surprised at checkout. That's the key, folks. You can use promo code ON3, the letters ON number 3 at checkout for $20 off your first purchase. It's my favorite thing. Whether I'm going to a Phillies game, whether I'm going to an Eagles game, or whether I have friends looking for Penn State tickets, the best part about Game Time is there's no shock at checkout. You don't get there and say, man, I found these great seats in the Rose Bowl for $50. And then you get to checkout and they're $150. No tricks, no surprises. The all-in pricing is the way to go with Game Time. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time by downloading the Game Time app, creating an account, and using code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code ON3, ON number 3 for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. Thanks, Game Time, for being a sponsor here of the BWI Live Show, where we now move on to the question of the day. How does Penn State fix its offense, and what can it do? Yeah. I thought you phrased your question perfectly to James Franklin in the sense of, how long does this stuff take, right? That's what everyone wants to know. And the idea being that I think there's some things you can, if you just boil it down to its simplest form, right? There's some things that you can probably fix pretty quickly. And there's some things that are just going to take time to either implement in terms of changes to what they thought they were going to be able to do versus what they've done. And also guys just executing. Like, you can take 1,000 passes on the jugs machine, T. Frank, but to the point you're about to get into with first downs and a couple players in particular on those first down passing situations, you got to do it in a game. And it may happen this week. Yeah. And the continuation of it not happening may continue as well.
Yeah, so there's and that's kind of what I alluded to in the first half of this conversation is like as Nate pointed out, first down passing is something they did early in the game, early in the season. They were going early and often to the receivers to get the quarterback in a rhythm against Oregon, and this is the reason I wanted to differentiate this. In the first half, they absolutely ran the ball on every single first down. There was one first down pass in the first half, I think, and then the rest were from the late third quarter on. Part of that is what Oregon was doing because, as we talked about, they replicated Penn State's defense, playing a too-high defense with a very soft interior and daring Penn State to run the football in those situations. And unlike Oregon, Penn State couldn't punch through the defensive line. The adaptation and the adjustment in the game took a little bit longer. And I would say, like, I guess the where I want to start here is I don't think Penn State should overreact to the game plan that Oregon played last week. Because I don't think every team's going to be able to do that to them, and not every team so far has done that to them. Most of the teams are stacking the box. They're doing the opposite. They're stacking the box. They're putting more bodies into the running lanes as opposed to what Oregon did, which was to play a lot of take away the passing game and daring Penn State to run. But in this season so far, if we talk about first down passing, the first thing Penn State has to do is edit the offense. They have to tailor down who are the primary targets on offense. And James Franklin talked about spreading the ball around. I think that's still important. If we're still talking about Luke Reynolds, Devontae Ross, Trevor Pena, and running backs like Nick Singleton, Katron Allen. So those 4 or 5 guys, absolutely. But here's been a big drain in Penn State's passing. One of the first down passes in that game, Kyron Hudson clanged off his face mask. And I know, like, everyone wants the ball to be perfect from Drew Aller, and I understand that. I'm not saying it was a perfect pass. But the ball was on the receiver. And the ball has to come in hot because of the RPO nature there. So this year, Kyron Hudson, 2 of 7 on first down targets. Khalil Dinkins, 1 of 4. So there needs to be an editing of who's getting the ball because certain players haven't been reliable so far. And that is not to say they have to be thrown out of the offense, but there has to be a focus on here are the players that are being productive, here are the situations that are positive, and we're going to focus on those players. And if you just get completions on first down, because they have shown that they do want to throw the ball on first down, get their quarterback in a rhythm, those are things that I think are easily changed. Now, the sticky part, here's a long-term thing. I think, and I've criticized Kyron Hudson for his play against Villanova before the non-conference season started. There are plays that I think that just from a senior, it's hard to swallow. And there were more of those against Oregon and freshman corners. So the X receiver position needs to be re-evaluated. We are now into October. James Franklin talks about this 5-game window where the next wave of players need to be ready. There needs to be a reopening of the conversation about who's playing that X receiver position because Kyron Hudson a lot of times gets isolated on one side of the field to feature him in the passing game. You can move Trevor Pena over there. You can move Devontae Ross over there. Those guys can play X, but their positional skills don't equate the same. So to me, this opens the conversation of Kobe Howard. Now we have to have the conversation, does he now get playing time? Because I have not seen this functioning properly with Kyron Hudson. And you can do a bunch of different things in how to get isolated receivers. You can do tight ends, whatever you want, even if it's Nick Singleton. But if you want those easy layup passes where you can design a one-on-one for Drew Aller and a receiver, a lot of times it's been Kyron Hudson, and he has come up small in those situations. So that part of the offense has to change. That's a long-term thing because that was a big part of what they did. And however they want to reconfigure that, they need to take some time and reevaluate that. But in the short term, maybe it's just another player at that position.
Yeah, T. Frank. And let's just have the Tysier Denmark, Kobe Howard conversation right now because those two are basically married at the hip, right? The same conversation we had last year about Tysier Denmark, we are now having about Kobe Howard, and we can also have it about Tysier Denmark. So with Denmark, we heard last year it was a consistency issue. And I think we saw that even in the little bit of time we got to go to practice or even in some of the games he got in. Like, you could see what they were talking about, right? It was not meritless that there'd be routes and things that he did that looked really good. And then there
Yep.
would be times when he looked like a freshman. So, okay, he's a second-year guy now. So where is he at on that progression scale? And then with Howard, we've heard, and, the idea is some of these guys, and I think it was brought up specifically with him. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am, about not playing, having a bigger role on special teams to make using his year of eligibility worth it.
Sure.
At this point, if this is the offense that Penn State wants to run, I don't think the special teams matter anymore. If you think you can help at receiver, it's irrelevant.
And that's the point. Right. Exactly. Right. I think we're now this was my concern about Kyron Hudson coming in when we talked about this group has a lower ceiling than last year's group, but they should produce more efficiency. My concern was Kyron Hudson was not an efficient receiver at USC. If you want to criticize Marcus Hagans for like the lack of production, also sometimes the guys are who they are. As a senior, maybe there's not that much room for development, but we haven't seen that. We haven't seen that development. We haven't seen, even in contested catch situations, he makes highlight catches, acrobatic catches, but in contested catch situations, USC fans and analysts were talking about how he has bad hands. It's not even that I think he has bad hands. It's that when he gets into those one-on-one jump ball situations, he's not as good or consistent at bringing them down as the highlight reel would suggest. And this is why I bring up Kobe Howard specifically, because so far this year, Tysier Denmark has been backing up Trevor Pena in the slot. Pena has not been a problem. So if you're saying that now Pena is going to be playing a little bit more X and you're going to do more rotation there and Hudson can still be involved, but we're going to not have it just be those top three, then that's where I think Tysier Denmark has an opportunity to play. Or you can say, okay, now it's just we're going to start an audition over at that X spot. And again, I'm using these as general conversation points. All the players play all the positions. But when you start building the depth chart and you go top to bottom, Kyron Hudson is that number one guy who has been getting these isolation routes. And if you think Tysier Denmark can do that, then we'll have that conversation. I'm just going off of the guys that I think would be the next on that depth chart. Here's another one, Aaron Enterline, as a redshirt freshman run-on, who has been with the top group at times. He hasn't been since the season started. But again, if we're just going back to, we made these decisions in camp about who was and was not winning these position battles. I think to me, and I'm trying not, it sucks. Like, I don't like doing this, but this is an area where it's fairly obvious in the data and in the film. I think most of the receivers are very good, actually, in terms of their production. They're being productive. They're getting the catches they need to when they're targeted, but there are these big inefficient gaps, and that's the first place I wanted to start with the offense.
Yeah, so Penn State, I without question, will pull out all the stops it can to be better on, more efficient and more consistent on offense. But yeah, it starts with first downs. I mean, it does, right? That seems to be third down's the easy one to focus on because we can all pull up any of our favorite stat websites and look at Penn State's standing on third down and the statistical production across the board on that particular down. But look, the reason it's so bad is because of what they do on first and second down. So if you don't fix first and second down, and particularly first down, as James Franklin and Drew Aller said repeatedly after the game on Saturday night, you end up in these horrible pass obvious situations, which is not, of course, where any offense wants to be. So, yeah, Penn State will be interesting to see who makes that travel roster, T. Frank. That'll be a very fascinating thing to check out. 74 guys can go on this Big Ten trip to UCLA. So which guys make it? It would be, I think, shocking at this point, obviously, if Denmark and Howard did not make the cut, but time will tell. Yeah. And certainly that's a conversation we'll have later this week at Blue White Illustrated as well. But where do you want to take this conversation next, my friend? Because clearly first down and receivers is a big part of this, but it's not the only part of it.
Yeah, and this is something James Franklin talked about, and this is an area where I think the nuance of the conversation is fair across the first four games, but was very acutely a problem against Oregon, which is quick game passing. So a lot of these passing concepts against Oregon ran themselves into coverage because they were intermediate concepts where they're running either these vertical routes into crowded zones down the field because Oregon was keeping a lid on everything, or they were running longer developing concepts, deep digs, corner routes, things like that, where the offense just didn't give the quarterback some rhythm passes. And that's what James Franklin talked about, of wanting more quick game, first down, quick game. Like, just here, if a team is going to... There? Sure.
You may have been going here, but it's just been driving me nuts for 3 days. I've been waiting to talk to you about this. Why is there so many things James Franklin wants his offense to do that they don't do. What is your read on that? Because we've heard of things he wants to do now for a month. And so far, you kind of keep hearing the same thing over and over and over again. A lot of wanting, a lot of desire, not a lot of getting.
Because the reality is, I think the opposite of what everyone says about James Franklin is like he meddles in the offense, is he doesn't meddle in the offense. He allows his coordinators the autonomy to be the head coach of that side of the ball. And if Andy Kotelnicki is firmly in belief that his passing concepts, he's going to make them work, then James Franklin isn't going to get on the headset in the second quarter and start calling plays. So I think this is the conversation as I have always understood it. He is at a restaurant and he is the prime client. He's sitting at the head table and he says, this is what I want in my meal. Chef up a meal that has these elements, and then the chef goes and makes it. And he is going to allow that player, that coach, to go out and make an offense or a defense based on those parameters. And certain guys come in, if they're a 5-star chef, like Jim Knowles, they come in and they do what they do. And like the only thing James Franklin says is these are the ingredients we have in the storeroom. And then that coach goes out and makes what they can of that. And we've seen better or worse over the last couple of years, but it is more of a hands-off approach as far as I've understood it in the interpretation from the guys that we work with at BWI. So yes, I think he has the ability to step in and say, this is what we're doing. At a certain point, he is the head coach, but I guess if you wanted to say, like, where is the failing for James Franklin, it's to not step in and make some of these decisions. And I think he even alluded to that. He even said that's leadership, is to make these hard decisions. And I think like that might be something we see that might have happened this week of going to Andy Kotelnicki and saying, here are the changes that are going to happen in the offense, go make it happen. Because
I just struggle with
the identity didn't work.
Right. Yeah, I just struggle with it taking 4 weeks to get there. I think you had a whole bye week. And so that's where I'm at with it. But again, it is a tough balancing act, right? Because you brought all these guys back. Like, I think the most striking thing when talking about the offense was that he said during the week he said on Monday that, maybe it doesn't have to be like it was last year. It's like, well, no kidding. You don't have Tyler Warren. So by default, it was not going to be like it was last year. But some of these things, T. Frank, it just feels like we have, like, if I went back to show rundowns from last year, I feel like it's very possible we'd be talking about a lot of the same things. And to me, that's just the bigger issue as we sit here in, year 2 of the Andy Kotelnicki era, year 3 of the Drew Aller era, obviously year 12 of the James Franklin era. But let's get next to, if you're done with that, I want to get to the parts that I think is going to wind everybody up in the chat. But if you got more to go there, just go take it away.
Yeah, so just generally, we're talking about getting Aller into a rhythm and getting Aller confident so he's not throwing off his back foot and he's not doing some of these things in a pressed pocket, which the chat is right of, like, he has not been accurate, and the moments he's had to deliver, he has not delivered. But he's not being put in a good situation to succeed, to get the ball out of his hands quickly and to make quick decisions with being able to pick between targets that are open. A lot of this stuff, as we talked about in the postgame show, I talked about on Monday, talked about yesterday, he's being asked to throw into some really tight windows that really aren't even open a lot of times. So he's having to play off of out of structure. And again, specifically this Oregon game, there was a very little open, and he made some chicken salad, if you know what I'm saying, with some of his first quarter and second quarter passing. Yep. But when he was asked to then elevate the offense, he has not elevated the offense. So if you're out on Drew Aller because he doesn't elevate the offense, I'm with you. In terms of, I haven't seen that either. I was hoping that would be the case for what he would do this year, but there is an argument to say let the dude get into rhythm, quick passes. If teams are going to play zones against you, then you should have a quick passing game that allows him to pick the receiver pre-snap and then throw that player the ball based on the alignment of the defense. He's good at that. He's good at IDing the defense and finding the right receiver pre-snap. And then if he fails to throw the ball accurately, then at least like the situation is healthy for him to then fail on his own accord. But we haven't seen in these situations, other than the Nevada game, him be in a genuine rhythm of passing and throwing the ball accurately on time without there being this giant labor of finding the open receiver.
I know we have some questions in the chat. We'll get to those. I wanted to get through this entire breakdown with T. Frank because I think what we're getting to in a little bit may answer some of those questions for you guys. And if not, we'll come back to them a little bit later in the show. But T. Frank, the next one, and it's coming up in the chat right now, so it's a good segue, is get rid of that. Your notes are very simple, very simple. Yep. Sometimes T. Frank's show notes are very in-depth, very so particular, I guess you could say. This one is as blunt as it gets. And it is very simply no more tempo, no more wildcat and or take Aller off the field if you're going to do it. And I think me and everyone else in the chat are going to sit here and say, you nailed it, T. Frank, based on what we've seen so far.
Now, I feel like this is a campaign speech because I've done it 3 times now in 3 days. But it is very clear, and it's been clear this whole year, that the tempo plays aren't working. So we want to talk about the run plays and the run game not being in rhythm and having all of these issues with penetration in the backfield, the offensive line not looking good. They're not being put in a position to succeed because when they do get a 4-yard gain on an outside zone, where some of these should be longer runs because Nick Singleton isn't breaking tackles, they're then followed up with a bad situation of we're going to go into, and this is, again, very specific to the last Oregon game, using specifically tackle over, outside zone, up tempo, which is exactly what they did last year in the Big Ten championship game. It's the exact same thing they've been doing so far this season, and it has been producing suboptimal results. It's producing more mental busts by the offensive line because they don't have the time to ID their landmarks and then make correct communications pre-snap. You're expecting the defense to make a mistake, and instead, they're ready, they line up, and then you make the mistake because either they aren't lined up and you don't know where they are, and suddenly it's just an accident where a guy gets in the backfield free, or it's creating these kind of mishmash situations where there's not the understanding of what the front was, who's supposed to pick up and pass off defenders, where the double teams are going. These are execution issues that, again, are putting your offensive line into position to look worse than they are. Now, they're not performing well. I do have some concerns about, the right side of the offensive line. And Oregon, give them credit. They were much better in the trenches, and they did a outstanding job, even against Venga Ioane, of stopping the run. But when you're put in these situations and you don't get in a rhythm as an offense on the line, that is, I think, something that instantly could help the general feel of the offensive run blocking scheme. And just elevate what you're already doing by taking some of that off of them.
Let me ask the dumb question next, but when Penn State is forced to go faster in a 2-minute drill, and that is without question been its most efficient time when it has the football out at first touchdown drive against Oregon, which was obviously not a 2-minute drill, but may as well have been considering the scoreboard and the point of the game it was. Why does it work? And I get the simple answer is that there's less on the play sheet. But I guess my question and what I'm getting at here is, should Penn State be doing more of that kind of offensive game plan, offensive attack for 4 quarters as opposed to just those situations? Because certainly you see a different offense when they get into that kind of a rhythm.
Yeah, and so
first down was better, and that changes everything.
So it's more passing centric when you're in the 2-minute situation. So they come out in the second quarter. They got 3 minutes on the clock to go get a score, and so the first part of that drive, they run a couple of different plays, and I think they get yards on first down. But then the 2-minute warning hits, and now you start throwing the ball. And the thing early in the season, and this is, I think, the misnomer, the thing early in the season is when Penn State was doing this up-tempo stuff, they were running very simple running very simple calls against inferior teams. And so Aller could read the basic structure of those defenses and find where the mistake or the player that was just going to get open based on this is what we're going to do. Oregon was more basic but better structured to stop that. And even then, they got a call, and this is where I think Aller really did not perform well in that situation, because he had Luke Reynolds down the seam for a chunk play, and he missed. It was behind. He struggles with some of those seam passes directly down the seam to put him in front. He tends to put those behind for some reason. And that's, an area where I think he should have improved over the offseason. We saw that even with Tyler Warren last year, where Dinkins early in the year, he missed him on a seam shot. He has struggled with that play. And so that's a significant problem for him. And then Kyron Hudson loses on a route, and his timing is completely messed up with Aller. And so Aller's off time, and they missed that pass. Those are the areas, I think, in the 2-minute situation where they struggled. But basically, I think that the 2-minute success was a mirage early in the year. I think it's a long way of me saying that I think that 2-minute up-tempo offense thing is a bit of a mirage. But at the same time, there is validity to when they've been good, especially at passing the ball. It's been in those 2-minute situations. So I don't want to take too much of that away from Aller historically. This year, specifically, it's been a bit of a mirage.
All right. Have we covered all the quick changes, T. Frank, or do we have one more to get to?
Yeah, I just wanted to go in, like, the Wildcat, the point of the Wildcat is to even the numbers on offense, where you have an extra blocker, the quarterback is the runner, and then you have this advantage in numbers. It is very simple, basic football. If your quarterback is still on the field, you don't have an advantage in numbers, especially if Aller's in the backfield, because you're drawing another defender into the box, and he's not going to be blocking. So this is the same thing I said last year with Bo Bueller, Tyler Warren. If you're going to put somebody else under center, the quarterback needs to come off the field to even the numbers. However that might be. The problem is this year, they don't have a passer to create any sort of passing threat in those situations. I was waiting for who's the Wildcat quarterback this year. There is none. So, like, there needs to be an understanding in the offense that it's just not going to be the same as it was last year. And if you're not going to have Aller under center running those option plays, then, like, this is a problem. It's officially a problem that Tyler Warren isn't going to fix for you anymore.
Right. And I think we're starting to see more and more of that show up in some of these situations, not all of them, throughout the first 4 weeks of the season. We'll see what Penn State can do from there. Final thought on the quick changes, and I think you may have covered this already, but if not, let's just get into the conversation. It feels like so much of this is just the same thing over and over again, because that's just where we are with this Penn State team, except there's more. The biggest problem I see right now compared to looking back to a year ago is that last year we just talked about the receivers endlessly. This year there's like a handful of topics we're talking about endlessly. And the one I'm getting to next in that regard is the Kaytron Allen, Nick Singleton snap, share, splits, reps, things like that. Seems pretty simple to me. I'll run it by you and get your thoughts. But I think you use Nick Singleton more as a receiver and Kaytron Allen more as a runner. And you can get him on the field both at the same time and maybe help solve some of your issues that way.
I thought that this was going to be a different conversation today until I went and I looked at the actual play-by-play of the Oregon game. So, James Franklin talked about Kaytron Allen taking a larger role or being more featured because he's been productive. He started the game. He played the final series. He played the 2-minute warning series. He was the starting running back in all of the key elements of the game. Yeah. And in my interpretation of who's the lead back, who's getting the most important carries, Kaytron was on the field. Like, they have already made that pivot to where Kaytron is featured in these situations. But then he would come off the field, which is what I look at the first snap and then I assume, like, the way they have done it before is then you get that drive. But we're in the 2-minute situation and Singleton, the passing back, is now in the game. That's Kaytron Allen needs to be on the field. And needs to, like, I also don't think you should, as you pointed out, get rid of Nick Singleton completely out of the game. That is, there are going to be games, and this might be against UCLA, one where he's going to rip off a bunch of big runs and feel confident, and everyone's going to say things are back, and that might be just because of the way this particular team plays defense. But you also don't want to then just throw out the baby with the bathwater here. He is a talented player. He needs to be in a situation to succeed, but with an offensive line that is struggling this year. And again, the way Nate put it perfectly. When there's a bunch of trash to run through, Kaytron is better at that. When everything's going well and the offensive line is blocking cleanly and they can get guys into the second level, Nick is the guy that can contribute. And until they fix that, Kaytron needs to be the guy who's receiving more of the carries. And it has to be. I think we're still only talking like 58 to 42. But in terms of actual snaps, like 17 carries, 18 carries for Kaytron, 12, 13 plus targets for Nick, I think is a fair way to distribute that. But I don't think you should go Kaytron lead back and then Nick Singleton spells him when he's tired. I think that's a dangerous place to get into, because if Kaytron then gets hurt and you have no running back with confidence left on your team, right, now you're in a dire situation.
Well, it's pretty delicate as it is when you don't have a third running back room that can handle that job at the moment behind the first two guys. All right, let's move. We're going to move from the short-term changes to the long-term ones. We can hit a few of these super chats. Thank you guys for donating.
Yeah.
C. Paul King says, give Gunkermeyer a shot. He can't do any worse. Look, I'm just going to be very blunt on this. He could be. I think you've seen that. Yeah, he's made some nice throws against some backup defenses. He's also made some not so good throws. And so could he have, and here's where I think everyone, and you'll probably agree with this, I think, Where people get misled with the backup is that there's no tape on him. So his first couple drives may be great until they can figure out what he wants to do.
Yep.
And if you have a good defensive coordinator up in that box and they take that away, all of a sudden you're in trouble. So I am not a proponent of make the quarterback change. And that seems to be something a lot of people are gravitating to this week, and it's just not going to happen.
And it's also like when you have a freshman quarterback out there, a first-time starting quarterback, it's like going to the zoo because the defensive coordinator is going to bring out everything exotic. He's never seen it before. There's a bunch of things that Grunkmeyer's never seen before, and you don't know how he's going to react to some of those defenses that look like one thing pre-snap and are way different post-snap. And that is the ultimate roulette move. Like it is, you have shot your offense in the kneecap, or it's great and he's the next great quarterback. But Penn State, it feels like, would have more of that information than we do, and. I know that they to the fan base have not endeared or engendered the trust of saying like they probably know, but they still have more information than I do, and I'm not willing to go out on a limb and say like, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. Start the freshman.
Right. Yeah, no doubt about that, T. Frank. The other one I wanted to get to here, this is kind of moving into the long-term side of things. Florida Cop 911 says, what are your thoughts on Andy finishing the year off and moving on? I mean, look, it's October 1st. They just played the best team. One of the best teams they're going to play this year. Like, I'm not as ready as a lot of people are to fire the offensive coordinator, fire the entire offensive staff. But does it need to be better? Yes. And look, I think here's where I'm at with it at this point as it relates to this question. And again, I'm not predicting coaching moves that are going to happen probably months from now. But it goes back to what we talked about before the Oregon game. Like if Penn State goes, T. Frank, to Iowa and plays like this and loses, then yeah, it's going to be time to have that conversation. I don't think it's time to have it right now. But it needs to be better. There is no doubt about it. It needs to be better. It needs to be better quick. And that is why when we talk about these long-term fixes, I think some of them will probably need to happen quicker than maybe it's rational to believe they could.
Yeah. I want to go to this here quickly as well from Z-Man. He says, what about the O-line? This is a stickier problem. I asked James Franklin about the right tackle competition in camp and what Nolan Rucci did to win that job, considering how well Anthony Donko played last year. And he said, well, it's not really about that. It's about the right guard competition. Right. And how that played out, because if there was competition there, it would create a situation where then you could have a competition at right tackle. So I would say, like, the pain points on the offensive line, Nick Dawkins is what he is. And as the center and the guy calling the offense, that's taking out a Jenga block that I think is going to topple the whole thing. And I don't know who you would put there. Like Venga, I don't know who you would put there. The second thing is, like, we have seen Cooper Cousins struggle in pass protection and like give up easy pressures up the middle, just not seeing what the defense is doing. Pressure up the middle is a huge problem. That being said, tackle is the most important position on the offensive line. We could argue, either way about like center, tackle, whatever, in terms of like the importance overall, but physically and hierarchically, tackle is the most important position on the offensive line. And right now, their best right tackle is playing right guard, because their guard situation they didn't feel was good enough to then keep Anthony Donko outside. If we're talking about positional value, I would rather have Anthony Donko at right tackle. I'm willing to, what is the upside of Cooper Cousins learning on the job? And can you keep it? Can that happen while Drew Allard doesn't get killed? But the problem is Cooper Cousins isn't even the backup guard at this point. They put TJ Shanahan in last week. We were not talking about TJ Shanahan at the beginning of the year as a guy who's going to play because he needed to do some physical transformation of his body. And that went out the window pretty quickly. So I don't know if there are actual changes to make up front. As much as I would like to say move Anthony Donko to right tackle, I think you then just swap the problem to the inside. And at least with Nolan Rucci, he has shown in the past that he's a good run blocker. And he can, in those combination blocks with Anthony Donko, once they get their mojo, that can be an asset for the offensive line. So I don't want to give up on that completely. But yes, there are problems up front. I think with the tempo conversation and some of the other things about rhythm and flow, they're not being put in a position to succeed necessarily either. So fix some of those things first, and let's see what the offensive line can do after that. And then if you throw a quick game, you're not putting Nolan Rucci on an island. And so then you can layer in some more of those deep passes once you've put the defense off balance about when the ball's coming out the quarterback's hand.
Yeah, I think I struggle with this offensive line situation actually more than just about anything else related to this offense this year because of what they brought back, what these guys were supposed to be. And I realize there's some give and take and push and pull, or however you want to phrase it here, where some of what Aller's being blamed for is probably on them. Some of what the running backs being blamed for is probably on them. Conversely, some of what they're being blamed for is probably on those guys to some degree, depending on the play, what's supposed to happen, when it's supposed to happen, things like that. But that's what I struggle with the most is that you just expected this group to come out. Like, I don't know. I've been pounding this drum for years, and it's been, if you don't have 5 offensive linemen that start every game for you, you don't have 5 offensive linemen that you feel like you can win with. It's just as simple as that. This whole thing of, well, we're going to rotate guys and we have 7 that we think we can win with. Like
they stopped that after the first game.
Right.
Like that got killed pretty quickly.
Right. So, and I think it's fair. I mean, Cooper Cousins is a second-year guy. I know he's been raved about forever and with good reason, but he's still a second-year offensive lineman. Not the easiest thing to do. Not everyone's a Drew Shelton and Anthony Donko that can play as a freshman. TJ Shanahan's a guy with not a ton of college experience, so I get it without question. But the struggle for me is just that the rest of these guys do not seem to have, as a group. And again, maybe it's because of the way that they've moved pieces around. Maybe some of the pieces aren't doing what they want them to do. I don't know. But it's just for a group that was talked about so highly all offseason, it just has not been a strength so far. And that needs to change.
The Nolan Rucci conversation, we were having this in the spring of he's not practicing and he was not in winter conditioning. And the two things he needed to do was get bigger and stronger and get better in pass protection. And he didn't have the full offseason to do that. The one that I think is surprising is Drew Shelton has been super inconsistent. Now, there are plays where he is blowing guys off the ball, double teams where he's pancaking guys into the center, and it looks great. And then there are certain plays in pass protection where he just gets straight beat, and I don't understand why, because we've seen him succeed in those situations, or at least slow down rushers so that Aller can step up. Now, Aller's pocket presence has been pretty bad. It has regressed in terms of he used to be able to just step up or left, right in the pocket. He didn't always drift out of the pocket or try to run and just totally break contain. He was better at manipulating the pocket early in his career. And like, I don't have an answer for that. Like that should be better. So there's give and take in all these situations, but I think you're right in terms of like this offensive line, the situations are not what we expected or what we talked about coming in.
All right. Let's see what else we got on our list here as it relates to the offense. Drew Aller running more. Do you want to get into that conversation at this point?
I was watching UCLA last night, and they've simplified their offense to a lot of quarterback option and a lot of we're going to take what the defense gives us in this sense of when you go to these cheat codes too often, it tells me there's a systemic problem in the offense that we can't block on our own and we can't throw the ball on our own and get separation on our own, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And James Franklin talking about when Drew runs, it opens some things up. Yes, that's absolutely true. I think it is concerning that that's now more on the table. You did see it, by the way. So Bev in the chat earlier asked, is it true they went to more of a pro-style attack late in the fourth quarter? They started running Aller way more, whether it was design runs, he scrambled, or they started having him keep the ball in those situations. He's not elusive. So he's a powerful runner, but he's obvious. We've all seen him run. He's kind of gangly. He's kind of unwieldy. There's not a lot of fluidity and grace to the way he does this. So making players miss and making things efficient is not necessarily something he does. It feels like a mad dash for 4 yards. And that concerns me if that's a continuation of what they're going to do. But I think it is something that if you want to say, let's fix the offense and make this work, Aller, that was the conversation. He's going to run more this year because he got bigger, stronger. He lost some weight. They want him to run more. And so now we've reached the point in the year and the point in the offense where it is time that he now starts taking some of those hits. And then who knows, maybe C. Paul King gets his wish by default and Aller gets banged up and then Ethan Grunkmeyer's in the game. I don't know. Like at this point with the offensive game plan, this is what they built. I thought they were going to build something a little more around efficient passing. And I think that's what James Franklin keeps talking about is building around efficient passing, your senior quarterback. And there's still this vestige of last year that is around, and it doesn't make sense.
And it will continue not to make sense until Penn State and Andy Kotelnicki and the rest of his offense figure out a way to be more efficient. And that starts again on first down, helps you on third down, helps you everywhere else across the field. So I think that probably wraps it up for our autopsy or analysis of the offense. T. Frank
only took the whole show.
Yeah, well, that's okay. I mean, that's probably, again, to take you all behind the scenes a little bit, like T. Frank and I will start planning this thing out at like 7:00 on Wednesday morning. And the question always is, well, what should we add? And it's like, I don't know if we'll need to add anything to this one.
No.
This is as straightforward as it gets. And I think that, again, so many of you out there just want to know about this offense and how it can be fixed. And the problem I have, T. Frank, I'll leave my final thought with this, is that no matter what they do in these next two games, we're back in the same spot we were in the non-conference slate, where you can go out and score however many points you want to score against UCLA and against Northwestern, and no one's going to believe that it's fixed until you go to Iowa and perform there.
Yeah. Yeah, and so here's the other thing, and this is kind of transition us into the UCLA preview. As a longtime suffering Bills fan who for the first 20 years of my life, it was nothing but pain and sorrow, I noticed one trend. My team was the get right game. You know, like whenever you need to snap a streak or start a streak, you did it against the Bills. And so UCLA can be that. And that's what James Franklin talked about yesterday and he didn't mean it specifically about UCLA, but, you know, sometimes if the light just comes on, you get on a roll, you get confidence. Confidence is a huge drug. It's like a performance-enhancing drug that's entirely natural for a football player. Believing you're going to be able to do something and not being hesitant or concerned about it, playing at full speed and conviction. If you just get a couple reps under your belt where it works, then you stop hesitating. And so, yeah, UCLA could be a catalyst for it all to work later, so don't throw it all away and, you know, like takes the context of it. But yes, like it could be we don't believe anything, but it needs to be a stepping stone. It absolutely needs to be a, you know, fundamental stepping stone for this team to look really good and execute cleanly against a UCLA team that is not, whatever they may present schematically on the field, has not presented much of a challenge for the opponent so far this year.
Yeah, let's get into UCLA and we'll wrap up with best bets because we're going to tell you our pick, or at least mine, for UCLA Penn State following a look at UCLA. And as we noted at the top of the show, they have a second week defensive coordinator in Kevin Coyle, who is calling the plays. He's done it before, at least, so there is that. They will have first time ever offensive coordinator and play caller Jerry Neuheisel in that role for Penn State's visit to the Rose Bowl this weekend. Obviously, the offseason transfer portal additions they made were the talk of the sport. So far, they've led to an 0-4 record and a pretty widely held belief, T. Frank, that this team's going to go 0-12.
Yeah, they don't look good. So they just don't look good. I don't know how. There's so many things, and I'm still, because I've been sick, I'm a little bit behind this week. I didn't get to as much of the film study as I wanted to yesterday, which is usually my bulk day for watching film, and even like a little bit on Monday. But what I watched recently was like they're giving up 3rd and 7 runs to Northwestern for a first down, and they have like an even box count. It wasn't like they were playing a third down defense with nobody in the box. They just straight up got manhandled by Northwestern's offensive line. James Franklin talked about this. They switched up last week to playing a lot of cover one. That did not go well. Then they played more zone in the third quarter. That also didn't go well. So on defense, like again, here's a couple things. If you're playing cover one against Andy Kotelnicki, his scheme is great, actually. If you play quarters or cover one, he can manipulate where the safeties are, move them around the field, move all the defenders out of the way, and then run into the vacated area of the defense and get those explosive runs. That's what I was talking about with Nick Singleton may look awesome in this game because they'll just capture the edge and he'll sprint for 25 yards. That is entirely possible if they come with that game plan. And then on the offensive side of the ball, I hate doing this again, but like if we're talking about these are all now paid athletes, I'll be a little bit less sensitive. Like Nico Iamalava out there looks like a racehorse on a field with a bunch of donkeys. He is just by far the best player on offense. It is wild the athletic hubris he has in his arm. He throws. Like I said this last night on social media, he throws the far field out. So James Franklin talks about like there's only a certain number of quarterbacks that can throw from the far hash to the deep out on the other sideline. And he has the athletic hubris in his arm that you would wish Drew Aller had. He makes some throws where I'm like, that's a stupid decision. I don't know how he completed it, but that's a highlight throw. That's a wow throw. And he will throw with conviction over the middle. He'll throw in between zones. He's a good runner. He is going to be a guy that can threaten Penn State on defense by just doing things in a similar way to what we saw from Dante Moore of just elevating the things around him. But there's just nothing to elevate around him. The offensive line struggles. I'm still working, by the way, on the offense and looking at some of those things. I haven't seen receivers that really threaten you. I think they got one really speedy guy, if I remember the Utah game. But outside of that, like the consistent threats and what I talked about of the passing game of where are these routes going? What is the point of them? There's just not a lot of structural support for him. And so he stands literally head and shoulders above his teammates at times from a size standpoint, but also from a performance standpoint.
A lot of people in the chat thinking this is going to be an ugly, ugly, ugly Penn State victory. Let's see here. Shannon saying 33-20 Penn State can't get out of their own way. Z-Man said 24-6 Penn State over UCLA, calling it ugly with all capital letters. There was probably another one in there. I'm not going to keep scrolling back up. But point being, T. Frank, I think Penn State fans are maybe considering weeding during this game, maybe considering taking out the trash or some other project they have just not gotten around to yet because it doesn't sound like it's going to be very fun. So they're going to do it during this game, check the score every now and again, assume Penn State's going to win, assume it won't be pretty doing so, assume a lot of the same conversations will be had again next week. And I'm just curious to get your take on that.
Don't, please.
Right.
Don't. Like if you want to see, I do think there is an opportunity for a bounce back game here. It depends. James Franklin said if we have to win ugly, we're going to win ugly. And it depends on how they approach this game. They have to approach it like they want to win. I think they got to approach it like they want to embarrass UCLA. Somebody said, Mr. Stipp says Franklin needs to channel his inner Kirk Cignetti in the UCLA game, put up 66. I agree. Like you need to have a announcement of this is now different. And however you go about doing that, then I think you need to go ahead and do that. And there is an opportunity in this game to see Penn State rip off some really good plays. As much as I just said Nico Iamalava, and I probably am taking out part of his last name, I apologize. There is an opportunity with as much as he's willing to throw the ball into tight coverage, Penn State might get a couple interceptions. This could be a great game. So please don't tune out because we'll have the tailgate show and the postgame show, which we want you to watch. And by the way, 12:30 for the tailgate show, and then the postgame show immediately following to give you an idea of what happened in the game. And if it's another frustrating one, like I don't know, I'll tell you, why it happened again. And shocker, probably because players didn't execute. Greg, this is something I asked you, and this is something I don't have a good answer for, and I find it very frustrating myself. James Franklin talked about inconsistency on offense. Rhythm on offense. The rhythm part we've partially explained.
Right.
But the inconsistent part of offense, these are all seniors.
Right.
Why is this offense inconsistent? Why are they making these mental mistakes?
Yeah, so it's a lot of good questions, and there's just not a lot of great answers. I think you question a lot of things, right? You start to wonder how many voices is Drew Aller hearing from throughout the course of a week, and whether that's fair or not. He has a quarterback trainer that's outside the building. He has Danny O'Brien. He has Andy Kotelnicki. He has James Franklin. They have all these analysts on the staff. You just wonder, is he getting too much information, and is that leading to some of the struggles we've seen on Saturday? I don't know, but maybe. And is that leading to some of the inconsistency? The offensive line, you wonder what the departure and retirement of Frank Leonard during spring practice meant to this group, and his absence on game day meant to this group. So you wonder about that. Just looking at things that are no longer consistent, I guess you could say, when the players are, for the most part. So, yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that there's some things that you can't say for sure are part of the problem, but you just can't help but wonder either. And I think that, when you say inconsistency over and over and over again, and James Franklin did, at some point it's on the game plan, and at some point it's just on execution. Like, go out and do it like you have the last few years. And there's been too many instances of that just not being the case. Yeah.
And there's no clean answer, right? So there's no simple answer to that. I know Penn State fans are upset and frustrated with the offense and with Andy Kotelnicki, James Franklin, all of that. And it's like, this is the part where I think it's entirely valid to be questioning these things of how you can bring back so many players and not be, as Andy Kolnicki said, on the 300 level of the offense. It feels like they are very much still making 100 level mistakes. And communication pre and post snap for the offensive line, I feel, has been a struggle this year. And that was something I asked about, like in terms of like, how is this something that can improve this year? And that's something that you can take to the next level. And the answer was, yeah. I just don't know why that's not happening. And it's very frustrating.
It is. And I think that's probably why so many Penn State fans, those of you joining us here live, those of you listening on replay, those of you over at blueillustrated.com, get frustrated, because it is kind of the same conversation over and over and over again. And at some point, there's just not any other words to either define or answer it other than do better, play better, call the game better. And that is always easier said than done. Penn State certainly showed that over the course of September. All right, let's get the best bets as we wrap up this edition of the BWI Live Wednesday show for October 1st. All right, best bets brought to you as it is every week by BetMGM. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code ON3 and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code ON3. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code ON3 when you sign up. Make this college football season one for the history books. Make it legendary. Our week last week, not legendary. 1 and 2, the bounce back with some changes. Angle worked in the Oklahoma State game. They covered against Baylor pretty easily. Bo Prabula and Missouri did not blow out UMass by as much as I expected. Unfortunately, they gave up a touchdown in the first quarter, and that was kind of the end of that road in terms of covering 44. And then we had Penn State money line, which obviously you all know, as we have discussed endlessly over the last hour and change, how that worked out. So don't need to rehash that. First one on my docket this week, T. Frank, Clemson -14 at North Carolina. I think Dabo's sick of hearing about all the issues his program has and his star quarterback has, and he's, this, that, and the other thing. North Carolina is the mess we thought it was going to be. So talk about Penn State getting on the road trip and trying to get better against an overmatched opponent. I think that's the situation Clemson finds itself in this weekend. Not overly thrilled with some of the things I've seen from their defense when it comes to laying the 14, but it's a get right spot. And I think we see the Tigers get right as much as they can anyway, while the Tar Heels continue to struggle this week in Chapel Hill.
It helps when you face a worse team than yourself, and a more dysfunctional organization than yourself, for sure.
Yeah. So next on my list, Akron getting 8.5, the Fighting Joe Moorheads against Central Michigan. Here's the only, I have no rationale for this other than scrolling down the BetMGM odds page today. And I just assumed Akron, with the way they played so far, would just be, at least a 14, if not 21 point underdog in this game. And it was 8.5. And I thought, man, that seems like not enough points. It just jumped off as maybe a trap game or one that they're trying to get you to bet on the other side. So I went with Akron and Joe Moorhead plus 8.5 against Central Michigan in Maction on Saturday afternoon.
Are they not good this year?
They are,
Akron?
I would say, struggling. Yeah, I would say struggling. Okay. But
is their offense putting up a lot of points?
Not particularly, no. In some cases, I think Jarrett probably sums it up as well as anybody can, T. Frank. So he says disgusting. Yeah, it is.
People have asked me, like, hey, what about Joe Moorhead? What about bringing Joe Moorhead back? What worked a decade ago might not work now in college football, because again, defensive coordinators, systems, and teams adapt. And so, like, Joe Moorhead stuff worked at Penn State, and then at the end, like, it wasn't really working as well against the best teams, and then went to Oregon. It worked a little bit less well, and then at Akron, I think Joe Moorhead's great. This is the point of, like, these things go in cycles. You do need to adapt and evolve, and maybe he just doesn't have the players to do what he wants to do there. I don't know, but, like, there's no guarantee going back to the old thing that worked is going to work again.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I don't think that is a move that will be made, but I guess in this, it's 2025 college football, man. Nothing could ever be ruled out. But
Yeah.
I'm with you on the rationale for sure. And then finally, last but not least, we'll make our Penn State best bet of the week. I'm going to the total 50.5. And I have a couple reasons for that. I think UCLA is going to find a way to sneak one touchdown in here, and it's not probably going to come. Actually, I would almost guarantee it doesn't come against a first-team defense. But I am making my last stand here, T. Frank, on this Penn State offense doing enough to both cover a spread. It's 0-4 against the number this year, and cover most of a total over by itself. So we'll have our predictions at bluewhiteillustrated.com tomorrow, but I am going with the over 50.5 here. Feels a little light for me. And I think that some of the calls for like a 24 to 30 point Penn State performance on offense, based on what I've seen on film, is just a little bit light.
So you think Penn State's going to score 44 points in this game?
I am making my stand. Yes. My final stand. Yes.
I mean, I have been totally, absolutely abused this year with the point totals. I thought early in the year they're working on stuff because that's what I was told. I feel a little lied to about that. That was the reason some of the point totals were depressed. And then in the last game when they scored 3 points through 4 quarters, I'm fairly out on that. Even though I think, as I said, schematically and everything else, I can see a reason that they would be the team that does that, but I don't know about that. We do need to, Greg, I hear what you got there. We do need to make sure that we get everybody to know how they can go about finding help if they need it from BetMGM.
See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, and 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer now for new customers only. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are not withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. In partnership with Kansas Crossings Casino and Hotel.
Thank you to BetMGM for that. Yeah, so we'll find out. Again, I expect many people are just not very happy to hear about anything related to a best bet segment and Akron and are not buying on this Penn State offense to go out and do the job or that UCLA would score. I mean, look, none of us are going to be shocked, right, if this ends up being like a very prolonged, drug out, like 30-point Penn State win by final score of 35-3, something like that. Like no one's going to be shocked if that's the case. And that's why, and we got to get out of here. We've gone long enough, but that's why I say I'm taking my last stand, T. Frank, because truly I think that it hasn't happened in the non-con slate like we thought it could. Obviously it happened too late in the Oregon game. So you're going on the road, you're overmatched opponent, blah, 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 on and on and on. It's now or I don't want to say now or never for Penn State to at least look competent for most of a game on offense, but it's time to play a full 60 minutes on offense and defense. And if not, and if so, we'll tell you about it from Los Angeles on Saturday. But for now, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Nope. I guess the last thing is like, I know that there's a lot of animus out there. There's a lot of frustration. I'm still trying to be fair to the people doing the job. I very much want this to come off as fair to the coaches and the players and the situation that they are in. They put themselves in this situation to a certain degree. Oregon is a very good team, but hopefully like this comes off as, for fans, cathartic of here are the things in the way, the path forward based on the things we've learned, and also isn't just like rip it all to shreds, it's all terrible, it's all bad. Because that's not true either. And we're trying to give you as close as we can to the path that makes the most sense for this team and is fair to everybody involved as possible. So hopefully that is what happened.
All right, that's T. Frank. I'm Greg Pickle from BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, and that's another edition of BWI Live. Going into the books on Wednesday, October 1st. First show of October. September flew by, but so it goes. It always does. Rundown for the rest of the week. The guys will be back on Thursday with the recruiting show and more predictions for Penn State's trip to UCLA. Be sure to check back to the website and the YouTube channel for James Franklin's post-practice news conference tonight, his final chat with reporters before the team leaves for Los Angeles. And check us out, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. It is just $1 for a week for the first year, and then build annually from there. So get the latest intel and news on Penn State here on the YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and also do the same over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. For T. Frank, I'm Greg Pickle. We'll talk to you next time on BWI Live.